So guys, it takes an 1.25 inch socket to remove the nut on the axle on a Ford Focus and Fiesta and probably other Fords. I think like Explorer and stuff like that. And if you don't have an impact socket, no worries, because what I've learned on TikTok this past week is if you don't have one, all you need is a socket, an impact, and some black paint. Look at that. You got yourself an impact socket. Life hacks. Alright, so if you missed the last video, my boy brought his car in for an oil change, but he brought the wrong fluid, and I guess it's not as long lasting as it says on the back. It was a natural feel though. It naturally died within, half a mile or so. If you haven't seen the last video, check it out. We put personal lube into an engine in that 2017 Ford Focus, and it didn't end well. Long story short, we got an engine, we got the car, it's in the garage. We're about to swap the engine out. Be sure to hit like, subscribe. We don't always put wrong fluids in the vehicle, and if you watch my last video, I'll explain why we did this. As far as getting used engines from junkyards, make sure you go with one you trust, and make sure it comes complete. This one came out of a manual car, and it came with a clutch, so obviously I'm not gonna need the clutch, but I will take it apart. If it's a decent clutch, I'm gonna keep it for future, just put it on the shelf somewhere. But a lot of times I reuse the wiring because I double check everything, but in this case I think I'm gonna have to use my original wiring because this connector got damaged either in an accident or maybe during shipping or something. I don't know, but this connector's messed up. It would be easy to repin, but if I have a good harness, I'm just gonna swap it over and make it quick. So the way I like to make my videos and the way I work is I try to get it done as quick as possible and still have it done right. So the way I pull these engines in a Ford Focus or a Ford Fiesta is I remove the transmission. So I'm gonna jack up the car, about a foot off the ground or so, remove everything here, take the transmission down, and then disconnect the AC compressor, let it hang, and pull the engine through the top. The engine comes out pretty good because when I remove the transmission, I remove the intake on the Ford Focus, so that gives me more room to go back and forth. So you don't even have to mess with the wiper cowl or anything, because I know it's annoying to remove these wipers, and to put them back is just a nightmare. So all right, well, let's get to work. Let's ditch this Glide, and so I do want to see what the fluid looks like after we ran it, and here it is. I specifically cut out this bucket so we could see better because it's almost clear. But let's take a look. Oh. That is thick. Wow. Well, it looks like that's gonna take forever to drain because it's super thick, so I'm gonna go ahead and start taking this apart. Or should we try to start it one more time while it's draining? I think we should. Yeah, I think one of you guys that commented on the last video, you're right. I think the timing did skip. It's a chain driven engine, but I think the timing skipped because I was redlining going off-road. So the best thing to do is just get all the sockets and tools you're gonna need for the job, and I just lay them out right here. That way they're all handy. Also, what speeds up the process is these side ratchets from Milwaukee. I use the 3/8 drive. A lot of people like to use the quarter one, but most of my sockets are 3/8. So I have 3 of them. So what I do is, I'll put the 10mm socket on this one, an 8 on this one, 7 on this one, and I'm ready to go. I'm not wasting time swapping sockets. First thing, disconnect the battery. So I've got the battery out, I got the air box out. I'm gonna get the battery tray out and then remove the wheels, axles, drain the fluids, which one of them is draining right now. Still.
SMX Jake here. Me and Zach just
Yeah, don't use Glide in your engines. Don't do what I do. Don't put stuff on the windshield like that unless you want to replace it. Another great tool for the job is a stubby impact gun. This is plenty of power to remove almost anything on this vehicle. I try to answer everybody's questions on the comments and on Instagram about the Ford Focus and Fiesta transmission, but it got to a point where I'm answering the same question over and over. So if I already answered it 100 times in my videos and comments, I'm not gonna reply to it because it just doesn't make sense. You can just scroll down. You know, the most popular question is, what scan tool do you use? You can use any scan tool. The one I have is Launch 431 Mini. But you can use Forescan apparently to do a relearn, and that's the cheapest way to go, I think. Because my scan tool was like 900 bucks. Nobody wants to spend that kind of money to fix one car. I did because I do this daily. And yeah, it's all pretty easy. Removing the transmission got to a point where it takes me less than an hour to do. And in the garage with no lift, yes, I could go and take it to the shop and put on the lift. But this to me is faster. I'm by myself, nobody bugs me. I got my TV going, watching YouTube. By the way, the worst flavor of Red Bull is watermelon. Don't buy it. People ask me, why do you remove the intake on a Focus? You could just remove the starter. Yes, the starter is under the intake. And yes, you can get underneath the car and get to it, but it takes 30 seconds to remove the intake. And then I can clearly see the nuts and bolts and line up the clutch properly. So why not remove the intake, you know what I mean? I don't know if people are just being funny or lazy or both, but look at this. I mean, I already undid the bolts off camera, but that's all you gotta do. And now the starter is right there. You can get to the starter bolts and the clutch bolts and everything like that. So if I haven't replied to your I will buy your Ford Focus or Fiesta emails, there was like hundreds of them coming in weekly. If I haven't replied to it, one is either you're too far away from me and it's not worth my time to go get it or ship it, or two, you're asking the book value of a car that's broken with 200,000 miles on it. So that's why I haven't replied to those. The ones that were actually reasonable, I did reply to, and I actually bought a few of them. So if you're serious, I still buy them here and there. And also I was thinking maybe like once a month or so, I'm gonna choose a random person with the Ford Focus or Fiesta problem, and if you're close enough, I will pick up your car, fix the transmission, and at no charge. I'm thinking, should I do it? Comment below if I should do something like that. Now, it's gonna be for people in need, obviously. Like if you're, you know, if you're in a tight spot and can't afford to fix your car, I may just do that. So make sure you subscribe to my YouTube and follow me on Instagram. So in the last video, the starter quit turning, and I should have checked codes right away, because what happened was we overcranked it. We kept cranking it back to back and the engine didn't start. So it's a safety feature. It doesn't want to burn up your starter, so it shuts it off after you let the car sit for a while, or you clear the codes, or disconnect the battery, reconnect it, and re-engages the starter. So we took all the time to take the starter out and put it back in, where all we had to do was clear codes or disconnect the battery and clear codes that way. Smells like clutch. So it doesn't matter if I'm replacing the engine or doing the transmission work. If I remove the transmission, I will take the clutch out and clean it. That's another question people ask is, hey, if the clutch looks fine, do I need to take it out? If I buy a used transmission, do I need to take the clutch out? Yes, you always should, because if that transmission's been sitting for a while, water got in it, that clutch and the forks are rusted shut, you're gonna put the transmission on, it's not gonna work, you're gonna have to take it off again. So before installing a used transmission or anything like that, make sure you take the clutch out, you inspect it, you check the forks, lube everything up, put it back together, put it back in the car, and then you'll be all set. Don't make the mistakes. So guys, it takes 1.25 inch socket to remove the nut on the axle on a Ford Focus and Fiesta, and probably other Fords. I think like Explorer and stuff like that. And if you don't have an impact socket, no worries, because what I've learned on TikTok this past week is if you don't have one, all you need is a socket, an impact, and some black paint. And look at that. You got yourself an impact socket. Life hacks. Also, if you work for Milwaukee, can somebody tell them to make like a hammer head right here? Because who doesn't use the back of their impact to like hit something out, you know? Like if you gotta hit like a bolt out, who doesn't tap with the back? So make this a little hammerhead and everybody's gonna be happy. Sometimes the axles can be a pain to remove. Some of them get stuck, like this one. I got the nut loose, but it doesn't want to budge. So I leave the nut on there, not to damage the threads. And I have this piece of rebar, and I just put it in there like that and tap it with a hammer lightly. If you have to, if it's very rusted, this one's not bad, but if it's like super rusted from like up north somewhere, you want to spray something in there to kind of help out the situation. So I'm gonna tap it and see if it goes. If not, I'm gonna spray it and give it a few minutes. See, that one went pretty easy. So now you can take the nut off, and as you can see, it moves back and forth. Same thing on the other side. So you don't have to disconnect the tie rod ends or anything like that. All you have to do is pull the lower ball joint out from the spindle. And what I do is I have this long rebar here, or something digger, lifetime warranty. I've bent it like 100 times, but a lot of times if you just take it, something long, as she said, take it like that, put it against the body, and just do that. See, that one came out pretty easy. That's how I do it. It's quick. You don't have to look for any special tools. You just put this in there. And yes, again, if it's rusted from up north, this will not be that easy. So what you want to do is when you spray the axle nut, you want to spray the ball joint area with some PB blaster or something. Let it sit for like 5-10 minutes. It'll come out eventually. So now all you have to do is just pull the spindle back enough to get the axle out. I always put the nut back on the axle because you don't want to damage those threads. It's so easy to damage them, and it just sucks to replace something that you don't need to replace. So I'm just about ready to pull the transmission away, and you're not gonna believe this. This is how fast this process is. The oil or the lube glide is still draining. I'm about to remove the transmission already, and the engine is next, and it's still dripping very slow. So at this point, again, a lot of people ask, why do you drain the transmission fluid? You don't have to do that. A couple of reasons. I want to look at it, see what it looks like, check for metal, and also I don't have to plug the holes on the axles or whatever, not to spill it and stuff like that, just in case I have to put the transmission on the side, which if you are taking the clutch out, you need to put the transmission on the side. So it just doesn't make sense not to drain it. And if the fluid is new, you can reuse it. I gotta say, it doesn't look bad, but it's pretty dark, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that's probably original fluid. This car has 81,000 miles on it, which is sad because someone destroyed this engine before us. We just helped it out. But I'm gonna probably put new fluid in it. It only takes about a quart on the Ford Focus and a little bit more than a quart and a half on the Fiesta. And make sure you use the right fluid in these transmissions. It's the dual clutch transmission fluid. And I've picked up these cars from the auction with ATF in it, like 4 or 5 quarts of ATF in it. And you know, those transmissions, they only need that to lubricate the gears. They don't use the fluid to actually shift or anything like that. So when you put ATF in a transmission, it's like you put an ATF in a differential. So make sure you get the right stuff. There are 6 nuts that's holding the clutch to the flywheel on the automatic transmissions, Ford Focus and Fiesta. It's the same clutch. Different transmission housing, however, so don't mix those up. All you need is a 13mm socket, and what I do is I just take a screwdriver and turn the engine over like that. So there's 6 of them. Pull one out, don't drop it in, and rotate it. Take the next one out. It's gonna drop. It's okay if it drops now because I'm taking it apart. When you're assembling it and you drop it, that's a huge problem. So got one out. Go ahead and rotate it. It's not hard to rotate. This one is a little tight because of the wrong fluid. Again, if you haven't seen the video, check it out. Link in the description. If you want, you could pull the spark plugs out. It'll be easier to turn over. And I could have, because I'm trashing this engine anyways. And these are new plugs. The plugs were replaced. So I'm probably gonna swap those over to the next engine. But 5 more and I'm done here. So since I decided to just reuse the original harness that was on the vehicle, so I don't have to get to the PCM, which is located behind this splash shield and the plastic box, which is a great spot to put it because every time you wreck, you destroy your PCM, but that's none of my business. So I've started unplugging everything, and I'm just gonna leave the harness on the engine bay or in the engine bay, and ew. And once I have the next engine in here, I'm gonna plug everything in and turn the key. Alright, so I'm pretty sure I'm ready to pull the transmission off. I've got the engine stripped down as much as I could, including the alternator I removed and the tensioner, just to give me more room so I can go forward and then up. In the rear, I got the exhaust manifold disconnected from the engine, and I pulled the studs out to give me more room as well to push the cap back and get it out of my way. So right now the engine is just holding by the engine mount and 2 transmission mounts. So first thing I'm gonna do is let me check and see if this is done dripping finally. No, it's still dripping. Wow. I'm gonna go ahead and put the plug back in and start removing the transmission. I wonder if I could just return this because it didn't last long. It does say long lasting. I actually just got an idea. I want to send some of this off to get tested and see what they reply with. And I get a small sample and ship it out. Some people might say, hey, it's easier to take the front clip off because that also takes like 20 minutes to do, you know, headlights, bumper cover, and then the whole nose assembly comes off. But then you have to drain the AC, and in this case, the AC is that new stuff, which is the YZ1234 whatever, and that stuff is like $70 a can, and you need like 2 cans for this, so that's just an extra expense and extra work you gotta do. This works just as good. If I already had the front apart and the AC was drained, that's what I would do, is I would take the clip off, remove the engine and transmission all at once, and disassemble it on the ground. But this way, it's easier for me to just drop the transmission like I normally do when I work on these, and then just pull the engine through the top. Let's drop this transmission. TikTok's got me questioning my whole life. So apparently, if your swivel is limp, you just take an O-ring that fits best and you put it in there and it stays on. Another life hack.
And we're going to do the very first step to this process. This is going to be but it doesn't cut just what we're going to do is
As you can see, the transmission hit the ground, but that's just how I do it. There's no reason to baby it. You know, if it lands the way I want it to land, nothing breaks. So that's on the ground. I'm gonna have to take the clutch out, clean up the forks. But before I do that, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this engine out. It's already hooked up to the hoist. Just gotta lift it, take that mount out, and that's it. It'll be out. Then we can focus on this new engine, new/used engine. By the way, this engine came from Butler. They're in Forest City, North Carolina, and they're very close and reliable. One thing you gotta make sure is your part number matches. So this is a 2016 engine, and this is a 2016 car. This was a manual, but it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna swap over the flywheel, and everything else is the same. So let's get to pulling. Okay, now that I'm looking at this engine, there's evidence of the side cover being removed. So someone legit was in here messing with the timing. And before, obviously, we put the lube in here, I checked everything and it was out of time. This was out of time. It wasn't at top dead center. So I double checked everything. I removed the valve cover and I timed this back to where it's supposed to be. And then it started running decent, but still something was off. So, and then I noticed that the intake cam was replaced, and that's when I was like, you know what, I don't want to waste any more time. Let's just get another engine. And here we are. There's another engine. One thing about coolant when you're pulling engines, it never stops leaking, ever. Anyways, engine's out. That's what the engine bay looks like. And as you can see, the AC is just hanging there on the hoses, nothing drained. So I don't have to mess with the AC. I did make a little custom hook just to hook the exhaust out of the way. And at this point, I'm just gonna swap over. Actually, I'm just gonna strip this engine completely, remove everything, wiring, the intake and everything like that, and then put it right back in. So that's gonna be in the next video, and I'll also go over again with the transmission, how I take it apart, how I clean it, because this car actually ran and drove really good besides the engine being out of time. So stay tuned for part 2. I'm gonna show you how the transmission gets cleaned up, how the engine goes back in, and then we'll see if it runs and drives later.